Hey you, and welcome. My name is Mike, and in this old video, it is about the subject of reality TV. Now, reality TV is scientifically proven to rot your brain. I have no idea if that's true or not, but it kind of sounds like something that could be true. I mean, there's reality TV shows about every single thing these days, and everybody's a hooting and a hollering to get on them, to get their 15 minutes of fame, to get their yada yada yada. Everybody wants to be famous these days. And so, there's these reality TV shows that are really breaking the mold. You got stuff like Nathan For You and Jury Duty. But how about this one for a reality TV show that was a little bit different from the norm? How about a prank show where you are paid the kingly sum of, the equivalent of about $100 to joke around with people, in public, running up to people, smooching them on the cheek, putting your hands, over their eyes, being like, surprise, all that kind of thing. And then, when they turn around and are like, what? Apologizing and then running away. Sounds great. Sounds hilarious. Sounds like the best reality TV show I've ever heard of. Where is it? I want to watch it. Well, you will see some clips. One specific prank in particular. So you're doing this show, you're having a grand old time. It's a real knee slapper. And then, the producers, they come up to you and say, hey, listen, we got a real big one. This is one, we're going to put on YouTube. It's going to go viral. Everybody will be... It went viral. But everybody will be watching this. And you know what? This time we even have an actor for you to work with. This actor will be walking around in a public place, in this case an airport. And you have to run up to them, splash some liquid on their face, and then run away. And it'll be real funny. This guy's in on it, so he won't be pissed off. He won't be mad at you or anything like that. That is what 25-year-old Sidi Aisha and 28-year-old Doan Thi Huong thought. But it was not the case. That's kind of like the whole crux of this video. It's one of the most bizarre stories ever. See, the man they were going to surprise was the brother of probably the most famous dictator in the world, the most infamous dictator in the world. And the liquid they were going to splash on his face, it wasn't like oil or whatever they thought it was going to be. It was the same thing that's in that movie, The Rock. The poison in that. It was that. So this one didn't really end well for anyone involved. But, does it ever? This whole video is right out of a spy novel, and it takes us to Kuala Lumpur. It's about as international as it gets. And before, we get into it, please subscribe to see new content every week from that chapter. But now, let's give it a go. So, Sidi Aisha and Doan Thi Huong are the two women who are at the very center, the very center of this story. Two women from very different backgrounds, but both wanted to become famous. Both wanted to become TV stars. Instead, both would unwittingly become assassins. Sidi Aisha, she was from Indonesia. She was a good daughter. She was known as like a warm person. She came from a very poor family and she lived in a very rural region. So when she got old enough, she moved to Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia, and she began working there, like in a clothing store, kind of like fast fashion, that kind of thing. She'd be working these crazy like 16-hour days in there all day, just seamster-ing, making clothes, that thing. She would marry the owner, the manager of that place. When she was 17 years old, she had a son with the owner, but then after a couple of years, they divorced, and so Sidi, she had to start anew. She moved to Kuala Lumpur, which is the capital of Malaysia, and there she fell into sex work. Unfortunately, she was working, in a spa as a masseuse. Though through a taxi driver named James, I'm going to be doing that a lot this video, actually, just be forewarned. So through a taxi driver named James, she met a guy who was looking for women to star in videos, and not the kind of videos you might be thinking a sex worker would star in. No, he was looking for women to star in some prank videos, comedy videos, chillin' videos, funny videos. Doan Thi Huong was from Vietnam. She was described as, well-behaved, smart, and a good student. She went to Hanoi University, and there she studied accounting. She got a degree in accounting, but when she graduated, she found it really, really hard to get a job in her chosen profession. So to make ends meet, she ended up pulling pints in a bar. And she also did some like modeling on the side. Man, her heart was all about, you know, she wanted to become an actress. She wanted to become famous. She was even on Vietnam Idol. She wasn't a very good singer at all, unfortunately for her.
Anh mong ngừng sẵn trôi để những dấu yêu sẽ không phai mờ.
Ok.
Nếu không hát. Ok.
Chị nghe mấy câu là chị.
And so it all began for her in December 2016 when a friend from work, a fellow bartender, called up Doan and asked her, hey, do you want to work in some comedy videos? I got a guy here who's looking for an actress, you know, to do some prank videos and that kind of thing. Prank videos are very popular in a lot of Asian countries, so this would simply be another one. Doan gave a hearty hell yeah to that, and she met her friend and this other guy in a bar, and his name was Mr. Y. Now, James and these names, they were all given. That's how they would only introduce themselves to City and Doan. They never actually gave their proper names. Just call me Mr. Y. But he explained, you know, what the idea was and the description of the work he wanted to do, the videos, the kind of videos he wanted to make. And he explained that he was you know, making content for a Japanese company, you know, a Japanese production company. They were looking for pranks from all around Asia.
So
And so began months, simply months of this doing pranks all around Asia. Small time pranks, you know, dozens. Things like putting baby oil on your hand and going up and touching a stranger, or kissing them on the cheek, running up behind somebody, putting your hands over their eyes as in, hey, guess who? And then they turn around and then you apologize and you scuttle off. City and Doan, of course, were told they will be famous. You know, we're going to take you to all these countries. You're going to go to South Korea. You're going to go to Japan. You're even going to go to America and do these hilarious pranks. And you'll be known as the two funny ladies. Probably should think of a better name than that. They eventually, you know, after traveling around and doing all these pranks, they made their way to Kuala Lumpur. And at this point, their specialty, the real humdinger of a prank, was to run up behind somebody, hands over the eyes, guess who, they turn around, got ya, run away. The real funny stuff. They did it a few times, and their bosses, these producers, even instructed them, you try it out when in your free time, you know, when you're in the hotel in the evening, keep practicing it on these big stuffed teddy bears. Because you really want to make sure you get it right. Because, you know, depending on how you're moving, it might not be funny to the audience. And you've always got to be keeping it funny. Always keep them smiling. Number one. They even did a few pranks in the Kuala Lumpur airport in the weeks leading up to, well, what would be their final prank there. So they were told, we're going to do it again. This is going to be our biggest one yet. This time you're going to do it with a male actor. And the two ladies, they were given a description of this guy. They were like, you know, he's going to be a bit of a chunky guy. He's going to be bald, but he's an actor. He's in it. It'll just make the whole thing even funnier. Yes, it's a fake prank, but I mean, come on, everything's fake, so who cares? And so they were given oil on their hands and a spray bottle of oil, and they were like, go get him. Pranked ya.
Brother of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has been
murdered today while traveling in
Malaysia. South Korean broadcaster TV Chosun said Tuesday Kim Jong-nam was
killed in Malaysia. The BBC understands that Kim Jong-nam, who was 45, is said to have been targeted at the airport in Kuala Lumpur, the capital.
Little did they know that this was the brother of the most infamous dictator in the entire world, and they were not putting baby oil on his face at all. Now, real quick history of North Korea, just so you know exactly who this lad is and the whole story about it. Of course, Korea, you know, it's a country that's been caught up in the middle of wars and other countries' conflicts for centuries. But by this stage, you know, we're talking about the modern era. It's been defined by the split between the democratic South Korea and the dictatorship of the North, which followed the end of World War II. From like the early 1900s till 1945, Korea was controlled. It was a Japanese colony, and they were not very nice. to the local Koreans, as they were not nice to basically anyone during this entire period. But in 1945, when the Japanese surrendered, the Americans and the Soviets, you know, they went around to liberate all these countries that the Japanese had tried to colonize. The Americans took the south of the country, the Soviets took the north of the country, and they met smack bang in the middle. The plan was, you know, for an independent Korea after a few years of being governed by the Allied, soon not to be very Allied at all, powers. Right, you know, we'll govern you and get your laws in order and get your country set up properly, and then when you guys are ready, we will leave, and Korea, you're an independent country. But of course, when one half of your country, the North, was taken over by the Soviets and they started installing communism, and then you had the other half of the country, which was taken over by the Americans, and they started installing a democracy kind of actually with a wink though, because the people the Americans were kind of handing power over to were kind of the rigged election type, but I digress. Reunification was going to be very difficult. Anyways, difficult would soon become impossible, as both sides of Korea thought that the other side should be ruled their way. The North fell under Soviet control and the South became a democratic republic, and with both sides thinking the other should follow their rules for independence, you had the devastating Korean War. The man who would become the first supreme leader, Kim Il-sung, he was considered a war hero for his role in fighting the Japanese, you know, during World War II. He gained, you know, considerable political power, and so it didn't take long for, you know, the Soviets to, alright, here you go, here's control of North Korea. Off you go, pal! And it's impossible just to overstate just how much of an impact that would have on future global relations in the area, because in 1950, Kim Il-sung thought it would be just a wonderful idea to invade South Korea, hence beginning the 3-year-long Korean War conflict, which decimated the entire country. I mean, it was already divided in half, and this just ripped it completely in half. Nearly, you know, the North Koreans almost won within a couple of months. They got all the way down to Busan, then the Americans came in, then they almost took over North Korea, and it was a 3-year-long war that just tore the country apart and didn't actually change anything at all, other than adding the demilitarized zone in the middle, and of course, Korea is still technically at war to this very day. There never was actually a peace treaty signed, so it's really, well, an uneasy peace, peppered with occasional incursions into each other's territories, and that is what has prevailed ever since. Except when the North decides to be like a little bitch and just like launch rockets willy-nilly. Weirdly, the biggest threat to that peace has also persisted, with the Kim family being, you know, this dynasty of dictators still in power and just kind of like evil leaders. I mean, they're essentially what every evil dictator is based on the Kim family. But of course, you know, the Kim family say they come from like a mythical line. They're like blessed by the gods kind of thing. And so, you know, they kind of just deserve to be dictators, really. And their kids, and yes, kind of so on and so forth. That's just kind of how it is. And all the while the government, you know, passes the blame on to Western powers for the sanctions that are in place on them, it's really the government's own doing, because obviously they're just like a load of shite, and you often hear about the re-education camps, and the constant famines, and even the reports of cannibalism that the local North Koreans are... It sucks. To put it mildly, I guess you could say. After Kim Il-sung died in 1994, after him came the notorious Kim Jong-il, his son who became a dictator, perhaps famous for being the only dictator, by the way, who's available in puppet form, which is pretty neat. But when Kim Jong-il followed the trend and died in 2011, he left behind this dangerous power vacuum in North Korea. But at one point, he had a very clear and very obvious successor to take over, to take the reins. See, Kim Jong-il had 7 children altogether. He had 4 daughters and he had 3 sons. And though the role of a dictator would end up falling to Kim Jong-il's youngest son, it's pork chop Kim Jong-un over here, at one point it was actually his eldest son, Kim Jong-nam, who was kind of tipped to be taking over the reins naturally. The oldest son is nearly always the successor. I'm the eldest boy! Kim Jong-nam was born in Pyongyang on the 10th of May, 1971. His mother was Song Hee-rim, a very famous and beloved actress in North Korea, and she obviously became a mistress to Kim Jong-il. You know, it's pretty kind of one of those things where it's like, did she have a choice in it? Can you really say no to a dictator? I don't think so. Kim Jong-nam was actually homeschooled by his eldest sister for much of his life. Then he went off to study in Switzerland, like all good dictators do, and then to Russia. Now, Kim Jong-nam apparently took after his mother, more so than his father in many, many ways. He did have his dad's very kind of short temper, really get pissed off very, very quickly. Kim Jong-nam was more like his mother in that he loved the arts. He loved film. As I said, his mother was an actress, and maybe he saw himself as like a bit of an actor too. He'd actually sit there tapping away on little film scripts, which I, for one, would love to read. And in a big old display of love and power, his dad built him a film set with props and everything like that, like totally indulging Kim Jong-nam's love of making movies. And according to a couple of close family sources, although, you know, Kim Jong-nam was the firstborn eldest son, he was kind of like tipped to be taking over when his dad passed away. Apparently he had just no interest at all in that kind of shite. Like, no interest in politics or being a dictator or anything. You'd rather just sit around watching movies and maybe making his own little student art films. Now, as I'm sure you're aware, and kind of like no shit, immigration and emigration into North Korea coming and going pretty tight. Shocking, I know, but they've got a pretty tight control over who can come in and leave the country. Kim Jong-nam himself, he managed to go on multiple secret trips to Japan and a couple of other countries, starting as early as 1995, and of course, as you can imagine, only those like closest and most beloved by Kim Jong-il were allowed to leave the country. In the case of the Kim family, though, it seemed that Kim Jong-nam, you know, as I said, you know, seen as the favorite child, seen as the natural successor to his dad, he was also the most Western facing of all. It seems like he was, you know, he enjoyed Western culture, even that of the hated American dogs. Jong-nam was the child who seemed the most open to, you know, opening up the country, building relationships with other countries, you know, and starting to maybe be a bit more westernized. Good for some, good idea for some, but definitely not for dictators. That's a pretty bad idea to start opening yourself up, because things will go down swiftly for you then. And of course, though, this curiosity would eventually be the downfall of Kim Jong-nam, and the reason he was even in an airport in Kuala Lumpur to begin with. His fondness for Western pop culture. In 2001, news broke that Jong-nam had been arrested after traveling on a phony Dominican passport. He was arrested in Japan, in Narita Airport. He had arrived there in Tokyo, there with 2 women and his son. Amazingly, when he was asked, "Why are you in Japan? What are you doing here?" The answer he gave them wasn't, "Listen up, guys, I got some, you know, secret meetings here, clandestine," a bit of a James Bond character. He said no. The only international leaders he was meeting was the one, I think you could safely probably call Mickey Mouse an international leader at this point. Jong-nam's response to why he was traveling under a fake passport and what he was doing in Japan was he wanted to take his little boy to Disneyland. That's honestly kind of sad. A great little tidbit that isn't that important to anything is the name the fake Dominican passport was in, Pangshong, which translates to Fat Bear. I mean, if you're choosing your own passport and like it's a fake passport and you can choose your own name, why would you pick the name Fat Bear? I think he was just being very self-deprecating about the whole thing. He was like, "I kind of am a fat bear." Now, so as you know, as the eldest Kim Jong-nam, he was supposed to be the successor. It would actually be Kim Jong-un, who would take over the dictatorship of North Korea. Now, Jong-nam and Jong-un, they were brothers, but they were half-brothers. Their mothers were different people. And it was said to be Kim Jong-un's mother, a dancer named Ko Young-hui. She was kind of like bit of like a Cersei Lannister kind of type. She was in there with the elbows out, trying to make sure Kim Jong-un became the favorite son and that he would take over, to the detriment, of course, of all the other siblings. As he was the youngest, he'd be last in line, but she was in there like swimwear, trying to make him the number one. And it seems like she succeeded, and in fact it's been kind of like rumored that she tipped off the Japanese authorities that Kim Jong-nam was flying in under the fake passport because she knew he would be arrested and it would be pretty embarrassing. That would help then successfully get Kim Jong-nam out of the way of something that's been described he didn't even really want. And so, around 2003, Jong-nam made a deal with his father that he would step out of the way, he would step aside, and he would leave North Korea, and he left and he settled in Macau, Chinese territory. He settled there with his young family while his younger brother was named next in line. It's worth noting also that even Kim Jong-nam himself believed that the Disneyland incident was what helped kind of usher him to decide, because of his stance on political reforms that kind of nobody else in power at least was none too big a fan of. Whatever reason, he was gone from power, and he was now gone from North Korea. In his absence, Kim Jong-un quickly used his considerable girth to fill the vacuum left behind by his father's death, and after ascending to the leadership role, he quickly set about consolidating power. The first few years were the most violent. I think probably one of the most famous stories is Kim Jong-un, what he did to his own uncle, who he thought, might be kind of a bit of a threat to his own power. So he accused his uncle of treason. He then had two of his uncle's close allies executed via anti-aircraft guns. Which, as you can imagine, they would have very big shells, so they would make shite of you. He then had the blood of his allies poured over his head until he fainted, and then he too had his uncle executed in the very same way via anti-aircraft gun, which is a little bit of overkill. I'm not afraid to say it. Well, he was really into purges at the time, and so there was a couple of those defections, and so you really need to instill some of that good old-fashioned fear into everybody around him. But as I said, anti-aircraft guns, really? There's one way to do it. And apparently Jong-un kept a severed head of his uncle in his office as a trophy. Just, hey, check it out. He also did other stuff like having an official and his wife who he did not trust set upon by hungry dogs, where they were ripped apart. So as you can imagine from me telling this story, pretty much a lot of people were dying. Now, Jong-nam was outside of North Korea in China's time, but he was probably thinking, it's probably not good for me. Now, how much of all those stories of anti-aircraft guns and hungry dogs, how much of those stories is true, we don't know. A lot of it comes from defectors who maybe just wanted to give the South Koreans and the Americans and Japanese and whoever else just good stories of, man, it's real bad up there. Maybe these people even believed those stories, but they weren't true. It's probably a mix of fact and fiction. But there's one murder we know the story of to be completely accurate. The story is completely factual, because the whole thing was recorded. On the 8th of February 2017, Kim Jong-nam was due to fly on an Air Asia flight to Macau. He had arrived in the country, Malaysia, about a week before at 10:50 a.m. At around 9 a.m, as Jong-nam was walking into the departures hall of the airport, two women were waiting there for him. One walking around, the other standing beside a pillar. As he was walking towards the check-in desk to print out his boarding pass, he was approached by the two women. The first woman, Sidi Aisha, sprayed a mist from a small perfume-like bottle on his face before apologizing and quickly walking away. The second woman, that's Dawanti Huang, approached in the same way and rubbed her wet hands across Jong-nam's face before also making a swift exit. It didn't take Jong-nam long at all to realize what had likely happened, and he immediately made a beeline for a staff member to explain what these two random people had just done to him. They'd just done in his face. And being a paranoid guy like he was, he quickly began fearing for his life. He was right to, because at that very moment, he was already a dead man walking. The staff, they acted pretty quickly, and they took Jong-nam to some nearby police officers, who then in turn took him to the airport's medical center. But one, sad thing in this kind of case is that Jong-nam, after he was sprayed and then wiped by these two different women, he immediately started walking towards the bathroom, towards the toilets in the airport to start washing off his face. But as he was walking, he encountered an airport staff member, began talking with them, and then walked off. If he had just gone to the bathroom, used some water, and washed his face off, he actually might have survived. But be that delay, there was a couple of seconds, couple of minutes, whatever it was, that was just long enough to allow this deadly nerve toxin to seep into him and would ultimately kill him in a very grisly way. Jung Nam was already visibly limping, affected by the toxin within minutes as he walked to the medical center. The women were later followed on CCTV and had immediately gone to the bathroom and washed their hands. They then both fled the airport in taxis soon after. Unfortunately, Jung Nam was already in bad shape almost immediately after being taken to the medical clinic. Within minutes, he was sweating profusely and showed obvious signs of being in physical pain. Soon after, Nam became completely unresponsive and had to be intubated and given atropine and adrenaline. The effects of the toxin were already attacking Jung Nam's entire body, causing his muscles to contract uncontrollably. The VX kills by causing the muscles that are surrounding, the heart, the lungs, the diaphragm, to be unable to relax. They stay really tense, so eventually you pass out because your brain, from a lack of blood and a lack of oxygen to the brain. But despite the best efforts of the doctors and the medical people at the center, he would die within an hour, and it seems that no matter what they did, if you don't get VX nerve toxin off you within like a couple of seconds to a couple of minutes, you're kind of dead. It actually took authorities longer than usual to be able to identify Kim Jong Nam because he was traveling under a false name, under multiple false passports actually. Once they confirmed who the victim was, however, Malay authorities knew they had to act quickly before the guilty parties disappeared forever. With authorities knowing how high profile the victim was, the investigation went into top gear. After all, this is not just some random crime in an airport. This is the very highest levels of international espionage and assassinations and all that sort of stuff. So the people who did this, they must be absolute crack secret agents, hitmen, to be able to pull something like this off in the middle of a crowded airport, am I right? Well, surprising to everyone, not only did neither woman have any known links to the intelligence or military communities, neither even came from Korea. And the whole incident being caught on camera, it didn't take investigators long at all to identify the assassins. 25-year-old Siti Aisyah from Indonesia and 28-year-old Doan Thi Huang from Vietnam were arrested one day apart, with Siti being arrested on the 16th of February and Doan a day earlier on the 15th. Coincidentally, the same day that the post-mortem evaluation was conducted. Both were then charged with the murder of Kim Jong Nam. Both were absolutely stunned. They were shocked. They had no idea, what was going on. And so the autopsy was done. The autopsy of his body was done against the objections of North Korea, because they clearly didn't want, this whole story getting out. In fact, even to this day, they deny he was poisoned. They say he died of a heart attack. Police would then later arrest a 46-year-old North Korean guy named Ri Jung-chul. Ri Jung-chul is he worked in IT in Malaysia, kind of like IT, like with a wink, because it's believed he's the one who actually was able to get this poison, this nerve toxin into the country. He works as a chemist. Also, he would deny, of course, any links with the North Korean intelligence agency, even though he's North Korean, and the house he lived in was owned by North Korea. But the investigators, as I said, they were fairly confident he was the chemist who came up with basically putting these separate components together that would form this VX nerve gas. Now, VX nerve gas is banned pretty much worldwide by convention. It's illegal to have, but North Koreans, they don't really give a shit. See, the key to this assassination was the VX nerve toxin that was used. It was needed for the two women to separately touch Kim Jong Nam, because essentially it works by combining two separate things together. That's what makes the actual toxin itself. In chemistry, this is known as a binary liquid. You have two components, two chemicals, which individually harmless, but when put together, it forms something poisonous or explosive or whatever. In this case, something extremely lethal. VX nerve toxin can be used as a gas. In this case, it was used as a liquid, probably so it didn't kill everybody in the airport. They just wanted to kill one specific person. In this form, then, once combined, very little of it is needed to kill. Like a tiny drop will essentially kill you, and he got more than a tiny drop on his face. But it's a good thing the two assassins didn't hang out too much afterwards, because, they got these two separate components that, if combined, it probably would have been able to kill a hell of a lot of people. If they had been hanging out after, they would have been hanging out in the afterlife. The two women had no idea what had happened, but there's no degrees of diminished responsibility in Malaysia. If the defendant is found guilty, the penalty for murder is death by hanging, and that was the fate the two women were now facing. And of course their defense, though, surely it would be a good one. Well, their defense was exactly what they thought it was. It was just a prank, bro! What are you talking about, murdering somebody? What are you going on about? You're crazy. They said they had been tricked. They thought this was just a joke. They thought that what, their handlers were giving them was like baby oil and water and stuff. They had no idea that this was a harmful chemical. And that, as you can imagine, that bullshit was what was called, at least initially. However, the Malaysian authorities would eventually, putting bits and pieces of evidence together that they were able to document, eventually it was found that, well, it was plausible enough that the original murder charges were eventually dropped. Huang did plead guilty to the much lesser charge of voluntary causing hurt by dangerous weapons or means, and received a sentence of 3 years and 4 months. Still nowhere as severe as the punishment she could have received, which was, So despite the entire crime being recorded on CCTV across an entire airport, today both of Kim Jong-nam's assassins, unwitting and unwilling assassins, they walk free today. The suspected chemist who likely supplied the VX toxin, Ri Jong-chul, he didn't even make it so far as a proper prison. He was released soon after being arrested due to perceived lack of evidence. Despite, that is, him and the North Korean embassy officials being caught on camera talking about Jong-chul's cover story and literally confirming his involvement in a conspiracy supported by the North Korean government. The others involved in the plot, all their handlers and everybody, well, they could never find them because they immediately fled back to North Korea before they could be located, or the Malaysians just didn't believe there was enough there to charge them or indict them or whatever in this entire plot. It is worth noting, by the way, that Malaysia is one of the very few countries that actually still has diplomatic ties with North Korea, so that kind of played a bit of a part in it too. Malaysian authorities revealed that not only did Jong-nam have 4 different passports, all in his alias of Kim Chul, but also $100,000 cash in his bag at the time of the attack, and he also had several vials of atropine. Atropine is a drug commonly used like in surgeries and stuff to reduce the amount of saliva your body produces, but it's also thought that it can, if you're attacked by poison or something, it can help. Prevent you dying, essentially. Now, I don't know much about yourself, but it's not something I personally carry with me, but you can imagine Kim Jong-nam hearing all about these assassinations and the purges that were going on in North Korea by his half-brother. He probably thought, well, as the oldest son, I'm probably somewhere on that list. In fact, for months, it's believed he was fearing for his life that something like this, like exactly what he thought would happen. He also had so much money in his bag at the time of his death, $100,000 like in US dollars, is because he was working as an informant for the CIA. He was providing them with information as someone who would have been at one time in the highest echelons of a dictatorship that nobody knows anything about. He was pretty valuable. So why would his own half-brother want him dead? Well, I mean, the key there is half. Kim Jong-un saw him as a threat to his own power, in case, maybe he would launch a coup or something like that, and no matter what really happened, Kim Jong-nam would always be viewed as a threat. No matter how many times he said he didn't want to have anything to do with it, no matter what happened. As the oldest son, he would always be a threat until he was gone, which he is. Also, he was very critical of North Korea. Now, he would frequently say he had no intention to defect to the West, although he was giving secrets to the CIA for a bit of money. He was very critical. If he had been in power, North Korea probably would be in a better shape than it actually is today. Now, I'm not saying he would have been a complete psycho dictator like pretty much everybody in his family is, but you never know. It seemed like he was rather just more interested in, Disneyland. He probably would have opened the country up so there could be a Disneyland in downtown Pyongyang. Malaysia later sent Kim Jong-nam's body back to North Korea against, by the way, the objections of Kim Jong-nam's son, who has since disappeared. He's the nephew of well, half-nephew, I guess, of the current dictator, grandson of the former dictator. His own dad died pretty grisly. VX nerve toxin, not a great, it wouldn't be in like my top 5 ways to go. And so he was probably thinking, you know, probably not kind of cool for me to be around. He has since disappeared. All we know is that there were some reports that he's in Europe, under protection, probably secretly somewhere in Europe, probably under a fake name. But yeah, living on the down low these days, and I don't blame him.
Hi, my name's Kim Han-sol, from North Korea, part of the Kim family. Here's my passport. My father has been killed a few days ago. I'm currently with my mother and my sister, and we're very grateful. We hope this gets better soon. Yeah.
So what actually happened at the airport? I mean, the plan was quite ingenious for its simplicity and its execution. It's a really bizarre plot, assassination plot, but it worked perfectly. For obvious reasons, Malaysian officials have never released all the details of their investigations, but what we can piece together is that the 2 foreign women, one Indonesian, one Vietnamese, were deliberately chosen for their lack of ties to North Korea, giving North Korean officials plausible deniability. It also served an incredibly practical function. Not only did North Koreans have to spend months training these spies, they could just use these 2 kind of random women and, oh yeah, it's part of a TV show. They were trained, for want of a better word, for months and months doing this, like unwittingly trained for months and months of doing this to get, so the prank would be better and better and better, training with baby oil and with water until finally they were let loose on their mission when they were given a lethal toxin. Also present at the airport that day were 4 men, each of whom was a suspected member of the conspiracy, and all of them suspiciously fled the country for Pyongyang immediately after the murder of Kim Jong-nam. They were Hanamori, who is considered a mastermind of the attack, Oh Jong-gil, also known as the Godfather, and 2 men known by codenames Mr. Y and Mr. Chang. An airport worker named Kim Uk-il was named by the Malaysian police as being an inside man for their clandestine network. His involvement also probably explains how they even got the VX nerve agent into the country in the first place. As I said, it's internationally banned by chemical conventions. But also, as I said, North Korea, it's believed they have a stockpile because they really just don't care about your conventions. Your conventions can go... The whole saga is really so bizarre. It shouldn't be surprising that there's no real conclusion to this. The most bizarre assassination plot of all time. Despite knowing exactly what happened, nobody here will ever face justice or really anything because, you know, one of the benefits of being a dictator, you can kind of really do whatever you want and nobody can stop you. It's pretty cool. I will give them that. The Malaysian authorities actually took most flack for this entire event because their own people said, well, you guys kind of look like, you know, dickless here because the North Koreans can just really do whatever they want and you're not actually going to face any consequences or repercussions from you. You're not even really going to investigate it too thoroughly. But this is something we see all around the world, all over time. Like there is the Russian attacks in Britain, the assassination of Alexander Litvinenko with radioactive stuff, or the assassination of Sergei Skripal and his daughter. You know, they were poisoned by Russians, and the Russians were just like, all right, yeah, you know, no, we didn't. Clearly, we didn't do anything. So what are you even talking about? The Malaysian government was obviously extremely pissed off that the safety of its own citizens was put at risk for another country's internal squabbles. In the aftermath, the North Korean ambassador was expelled, and their own ambassador to the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea was recalled. Similarly, Vietnam and Indonesia were obviously extremely unhappy that their citizens had been drawn into Kim Jong-un's games. Vietnam actually demanded an apology. You better apologize, and they said if they didn't get one, they were going to cut all ties with North Korea. North Korea actually surprisingly did apologize, unofficially. Because officially, Kim Jong-nam died of a heart attack walking into the airport. End of story. Don't know what you're talking about. Plot what? Because the whole story, I mean, they could kind of even get away with that, because the whole story of faking a reality TV show to murder somebody is pretty insane. Altogether, it's pretty insane. So him having a heart attack is more believable than these 2 women were faked into pranking and it turned out they were killing. North Korea still maintains to this very day it was a heart attack, and that this whole story of a fake reality TV show and a VX nerve toxin and this conspiracy to assassinate him, it's bullshit. It's made up by those Western dogs who are trying to make North Korea look bad. Everybody's an enemy of North Korea, which I guess kind of includes you and me. So, you know, we're all out there, I guess, just smearing the leader of North Korea, trying to make Pork Chop over here look bad. Yeah, that's real hard to do. Thank you so much for watching. It really does mean the absolute world. It means the absolute world to me that you guys are watching my old videos, so thank you so much. Yeah, that's this whole video's one of the most bizarre assassination plots in history, so I hope you guys found it as interesting as I did. Some of the more upcoming cases will be, what have I got coming up? We got some ones on crazy heists. I want to do an updated version of the FBI's 10 Most Wanted, because there's been a hell of a lot of changes in that, and some are real weird. Of course, crazy murders, and, what have we got here? Oh, some dark history stories for you too, so please look forward to that. But let's leave it there. Before we go, please check out the That Chapter podcast, where you can hear stories, podcast-only stories. There's a good number of them there now, where I'm talking about Boone Helm, or Alexander Pierce, or ghost stories, which are always a lot of fun. Or also please check out the That Chapter Patreon, where for $2 a month you get early access to videos and a whole host of Patreon only videos. So give it a go if you want to, but if you don't, that's fine. You do you. But until the next whole video, please look after each other, please look after yourselves, because I love you. Mike out.